Imagine the absolute greatest empires in history. We're talking the Macedonians under Alexander the Great, the ruthless Roman legions, the sprawling Arab caliphates, and of course, the terrifying Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan. They all marched onto the Iranian plateau with their swords drawn, right? They were absolutely certain they were going to wipe this civilization off the map permanently. And yet, none of them did. Today, we're diving into the ultimate geopolitical paradox: how exactly Iran survived catastrophic, empire-ending military defeats. And they didn't do it by fighting back with bigger weapons. No, they did it by systematically absorbing and actually assimilating their own conquerors.
Welcome to this explainer. If you're someone who loves seeing how incredibly complex history shapes our modern world, well, you're in the exact right place. Today, we're putting on our Professor of International Relations hats, and we're looking through the lens of ancient soft power. We're going to explore how time and time again, the East essentially digested the West, and the nomadic hordes too. Seriously, how does a civilization lose its capital, suffer total military occupation, and yet somehow emerge with its culture completely intact? Even crazier, they ended up completely rewriting the identity of the very people who just conquered them. It's wild.
Okay, let's dive into this, because we have a lot of fascinating ground to cover. We'll start with the paradox of defeat, move into inventing linear time, look at bureaucracy as a weapon, then assimilating the invaders, rebranding Persia to Iran, and finally wrap it up with the invisible war today.
All right, part 1, the paradox of defeat, weaponizing culture against conquerors.
You know, history is essentially a massive graveyard of empires. When nations suffer these kinds of devastating blows, they usually vanish permanently. Think of the Babylonians or the Hittites. But with Iran, something completely inexplicable took place. Take a look at this stark contrast. On one hand, you have total military defeat. The Macedonians, the Arabs, and the Mongols literally left behind towers of human skulls, just brutal stuff. But then, that was followed by cultural conquest. Just a few decades after the smoke cleared, these same brutal invaders would just start speaking the Persian language, Farsi. They'd start building Persian architecture, adopting Persian court etiquette, even wearing Persian clothes. Iran essentially learned how to lose battles in order to win eternity. But to really grasp how they built this resilience, we gotta look at their ideology.
So, moving to section 2, inventing linear time, the ideological engine of survival.
Long before Christianity or Islam, Zoroastrianism was born right there on the Iranian plateau, and it acted as this incredibly powerful unifying tool. It actually caused a massive shift in human consciousness. See, before this, the ancient world generally viewed time as cyclical, just endless seasons, a series of meaningless accidents looping forever. But Zoroastrianism was the first tradition to boldly declare that no, time is linear. It has a defined creation, a forward progression, and an inevitable end featuring a final judgment and the purification of the world. Later on, when the Persians liberated the Jews from Babylon in the 6th century BC, Jewish thinkers adopted this very concept, which then flowed straight into Christianity and Islam. So Iran literally invented the coordinates of time that you and I still think in today.
But it wasn't just about time, right? It was about a cosmic battle. The universe was framed as an uncompromising war between Ahura Mazda, the god of light, truth, and order, and Ahriman, the spirit of absolute evil and lies. Now, what's really fascinating here is how this mapped perfectly onto actual geopolitics. The realm of darkness was physically associated with the vast, nomadic expanse of Eurasia. You know, the exact place where those devastating raids constantly launch from. So to be Iranian meant you were fundamentally an active warrior of light. Your entire culture, your statehood, it was all built on assisting the forces of good against this external darkness. And this early moral framework, it gave the nation phenomenal, almost unbreakable unity.
Now for Section 3, Bureaucracy as a Weapon, a 5,000-year governance timeline. Look, you can't fight a cosmic battle without some serious organization. The ancient Iranians built an administrative blueprint so incredibly robust that conquerors simply had to use it if they wanted to rule. 50 million, that is the number of people living under Persian rule during the Achaemenid Empire under Darius I. To put that into perspective, that was roughly half the entire population of the Earth at the time. Seriously, half the globe. Controlling a sprawling empire that stretched all the way from Egypt to the Indus Valley requires an absolutely astonishing level of statecraft.
Let's quickly trace this timeline because the Iranian space essentially invented global diplomacy. Back in the 23rd century BC, the Elamite state signed a treaty with the Akkadian king. That's the very first documented international treaty in human history. Fast forward to the 6th century BC, the Achaemenids introduce a unified tax system, standard gold coins, 20 administrative districts called satrapies, and literally the fastest postal roads in the world. By the 3rd century AD, the Sassanid Empire had totally perfected a fiercely centralized state and a really strict meritocracy. This deep, entrenched bureaucracy became their ultimate soft power weapon. Basically, if you conquered Iran, you couldn't run the place without keeping the Iranians in charge of all the paperwork.
Which brings us to Section 4, Assimilating the Invaders, the Reprogramming Machine.
So, how did this actually play out in practice? Well, when devastating nomadic forces breached the Plateau, the Iranian survival mechanism kicked in, and it happened in 3 distinct steps. First up, the conquerors quickly realized they needed the Persian bureaucrats to manage the state. We saw this during the Arab Caliphate, especially under the Abbasids, where the Arabs relied heavily on Persian methods of governance. Second, Farsi became the language of the state. Even though Arabic was the language of the new religion, Islam, the greatest scientific treatises and poems, they continue to be written in Farsi. And third, the invaders fully embraced Persian architecture. It's kind of crazy when Genghis Khan's grandson Hulagu founded the Mongol Ilkhanate. These harsh conquerors from the steppes suddenly started building these grandiose Persian mosques with beautiful blue domes and funding local poets. Now, consider this historical description of the conqueror Tamerlane. It perfectly captures the extreme duality of these invaders. He literally erected pyramids out of severed human heads, yes, but at the exact same time, he stood in total awe of Persian culture. He even took the best Iranian artisans back to his capital. Actually, his descendants, the Timurids, went on to spark a full-blown Persian Renaissance. For almost 300 years, fearsome Mongols and Turks held raw political power, but within just a couple of generations, the Iranian cultural code completely reprogrammed them. They irrevocably became Persians themselves. And eventually, out of that 300-year cauldron, Iran reforged itself. In 1501, Shah Ismail reunited the country and founded the Safavid state. And crucially, they made Shia Islam the state religion. This was a massive, absolutely game-changing geopolitical move. It forever separated Iran culturally and politically from the rest of the predominantly Sunni Islamic world, specifically standing apart from their massive rival, the Ottoman Empire. Once again, Iran forged a rigid, highly unique identity to ensure its long-term survival.
Moving into the modern era, Section 5, Rebranding Persia to Iran, a modern geopolitical pivot.
So, by the early 20th century, the country was really suffocating under the Great Game, basically carved up into spheres of influence by the British and Russian empires. It desperately needed a radical pivot to assert its sovereignty. So, in 1935, Reza Shah Pahlavi shook up global diplomacy. For centuries, the West had called the country Persia, which was a term derived from the Greek name for the Pars region. But in Europe, it had become heavily associated with colonial exoticism, fairy tales, flying carpets, and backwardness. Reza Shah demanded the world use their true ancient name, Iran. Now, this wasn't just some linguistic whim. It was a highly calculated geopolitical statement demanding respect. The message was clear. We are not some exotic colony. We are a modernized, powerful, sovereign nation with ancient roots.
And finally, Section 6, The Invisible War. Today, myths versus modern reality.
Decades of 20th century political turbulence eventually exploded in the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Relations with the West were essentially severed, leaving us with a stunning historical paradox today. Think about how these two distinct identities live side by side in the modern mind. When people hear modern Iran, it immediately triggers images of geopolitical tension, harsh sanctions, and grim news reports. But the word Persia, that hasn't disappeared at all. It retains this romantic, mythical aura of refined poetry and lost grandeur. It's kind of wild. 2 names, 1 land, and a continuous, relentless struggle over exactly how this 5,000-year-old culture is going to be remembered.
Over 5 millennia, this culture developed the absolute ultimate mechanism for survival. They didn't just disappear when they were crushed by Macedonians, Arabs, or Mongols. They simply absorbed them. They stood at the origins of civilization, literally invented linear time, and perfected the ultimate long game of soft power. So I'll leave you with this thought. In a world defined by modern fast-paced conflicts and immediate headlines, how will this ancient, deeply ingrained instinct for cultural survival and assimilation shape Iran's future? Because the greatest battles aren't always fought with standing armies. Sometimes they are quiet, invisible wars over identity itself. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you next time.